All right, let's dive into one of history's most epic conflicts, the Third Crusade. Now, this was so much more than just a war for territory. We're talking about a massive struggle for the Holy Land itself, fought by some of the most legendary figures you can imagine. This was truly a clash of empires, of faiths, and of brilliant military minds. And you know what? That's not an exaggeration at all. The sheer drama of this period is just incredible. It's this amazing mix of raw ambition, powerful faith, and absolute tactical genius. And right at the heart of it all were two incredible rival leaders locked in what was basically a personal contest for the fate of a kingdom. On one side, you have Saladin, the brilliant sultan who had managed to unite the Muslim world. And on the other, Richard the Lionheart, the warrior king of England, and really the pride of Christendom. You can almost look at the entire crusade as a personal duel between these two titans. But to really get how it all started, we first have to rewind a bit and look at Saladin's masterstroke. Yeah, before Richard even set foot in the Holy Land, Saladin had already pulled off a victory so total, so absolutely devastating, that it sent shockwaves all the way across Europe. It was this victory that triggered the whole crusade in the first place. That victory was the Battle of Hattin. In just a single day, the main army of the Crusader Kingdom of Jerusalem was, for all intents and purposes, wiped off the map. Seriously, this wasn't just a defeat, it was a complete annihilation. And it was all thanks to Saladin's brilliant and pretty ruthless strategy. So, how did he do it? It was masterful, really. First, Saladin cleverly lured the entire Crusader army into these dry, arid plains, miles away from any water. Then he used his super-fast horse archers to just relentlessly attack them under the scorching sun. Finally, he cut them off, blocking their desperate march towards the springs at Hattin. He trapped them. By the time the real battle even started, the Crusaders were already beaten, dying of thirst, totally exhausted, and completely demoralized. With the Christian army completely shattered, the path was clear. On October 2nd, 1187, Saladin marched into Jerusalem, reclaiming the holy city for Islam after it had been under Crusader rule for almost 100 years. And as you can imagine, the news of Jerusalem's fall just stunned Christendom. It demanded a response. And oh, what a response it was. The Pope called for a new crusade, and this time, the most powerful kings in Europe answered the call themselves, putting together armies on a scale that had never, ever been seen before. The first to get moving was the Holy Roman Emperor, a guy named Frederick Barbarossa. He led a colossal army. Some estimates put it at over 100,000 men. I mean, this force was so massive, it genuinely struck fear into Saladin and his commanders. It just seemed unstoppable. But it wasn't. In one of the most bizarre and shocking twists of fate in history, the mighty emperor, getting impatient with how slow his army was moving, tried to cross a river on his horse. He got thrown into the freezing water and drowned. And just like that, the largest army of the entire crusade completely fell apart. So with Barbarossa gone, leadership of the crusade fell to the two great rivals of the West, King Philip of France and the newly crowned King Richard of England. Now, Philip was a pretty cunning politician, but Richard was the true warrior. And after some early campaigns together, Philip would eventually pack up and go back to France, leaving Richard the Lionheart in sole command of the whole shebang. So the first major target for the Crusaders was the vital port city of Acre. But there was a problem. The Christian forces who were already there besieging the city were themselves trapped by Saladin's main army. It had turned into this brutal, grinding stalemate that was just chewing up men on both sides. And that siege dragged on for nearly 2 brutal years. It was a relentless war of attrition. Both camps were just ravaged by starvation and disease, especially during the harsh winters. It was the arrival of Philip and then Richard, with fresh troops and powerful new siege engines, that finally tipped the balance. In July of 1191, the city fell. But that victory came at a staggering cost. I mean, look at these numbers. This is just the toll on the Crusader leadership alone, not even counting the tens of thousands of common soldiers who died. The loss of so many high-ranking nobles just shows you how devastating this kind of warfare was for everyone involved. With Acre now in his hands, Richard was eager to press his advantage, but he felt the surrender terms were being delayed by Saladin. So, in a move that was both ruthless and hugely controversial, Richard ordered the public execution of the city's garrison, about 2,700 men. It was a brutal message for sure, but it was crystal clear. The Lionheart would not be delayed. With the Crusades' momentum fired up again, Richard began his march south along the coast, heading for the port of Jaffa. All the while, Saladin's army shadowed him, constantly harassing his column of soldiers. You could feel it in the air. This was all building to the ultimate showdown between the two great commanders. And this is where Richard's military genius really truly shines. To counter Saladin's super-fast hit-and-run tactics, he came up with this revolutionary marching formation. See, by hugging the coast, his fleet could keep him supplied. But even more importantly, he used his infantry and crossbowmen like a moving wall, a protective shield to absorb the constant arrow attacks. This level of discipline was radical for its time. It required his knights to just wait and hold their charge until the one perfect, decisive moment. At the Battle of Arsuf, Saladin finally threw everything he had at them. For hours, the Crusaders just endured this storm of arrows and attacks. Then, Richard gave the signal. The heavy knights charged, and they absolutely shattered Saladin's lines. The result, as you can see, was a stunningly one-sided victory that completely broke Saladin's aura of invincibility. Okay, so Richard had proven he could beat Saladin in a straight-up fight. But taking the heavily fortified city of Jerusalem, which was deep inland and far away from his navy, well, that was a whole other problem. The war was entering a new phase. Twice, Richard marched his army to within sight of Jerusalem's walls, and twice he was forced to turn back, realizing that a long siege was just too risky. At the same time, Saladin's forces were just exhausted from years and years of fighting. Both sides had reached a total stalemate. So what happens when two brilliant opponents realize that neither one of them can win? Well, it turns out they fight one last time. Trying to get a better bargaining position, Saladin launched a surprise attack on the city of Jaffa and nearly took it. Richard, who was miles away, gathered a tiny force, sailed down the coast, and, in this legendary display of personal courage, literally waded ashore at the head of the charge and drove Saladin's much bigger army right out of the city. After that incredible fight for Jaffa, both sides knew the war had reached its limit. They were spent, and Richard was getting urgent news about political problems back in England. So this led them to the Treaty of Jaffa, which was a remarkably practical compromise that finally ended all the fighting. So who won? Well, it's complicated. The Crusaders failed in their main goal, right? They didn't recapture Jerusalem. But they had successfully re-established a secure and strong Crusader kingdom all along the coast. And Saladin, for his part, had held on to Jerusalem, but his army was battered and his reputation as invincible was gone. It was, for all intents and purposes, a draw. The Third Crusade ended not with some huge final battle, but with a treaty born from mutual exhaustion and, you have to think, a hard-won respect between two incredible leaders. Richard sailed for home, and Saladin would actually die just a few months later. And it leaves us with this final thought. In a war where neither side got everything it wanted, but both commanders secured their people's place in the Holy Land, can there ever really be a true victor?
Thank you for watching. The Turning Point if you love epic and tragic historical stories like this. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell to continue our journey through the Fourth Crusade, plunder, not holy war.